to sit up all night and wait for you to come home. Now remember, young people, when we tell you something, it doesn't mean we're mad at you. It means we love you very, very much. We love you with all our hearts. We brought you into this world. It doesn't mean we're mad at you, young people. And with that, I always like to say a prayer with my language. I'm a residential school survivor. I lost my culture. I lost my language. I lost everything when I went to residential school. Today, I can speak my language and I believe in my language and I honor it and I respect it. So I'm going to pray in my language for my support and my prayers go out to her. Ay, ay. Oh, wow. That's good.
I'm lucky because my grandpa always makes us feel that we're part of his family. When I was a kid, I was confused about my identity. My adoptive parents wanted me to know who I was. When I was 16, they helped me find my birth parents.
Yeah, go ahead. Put them in. Yeah.
I try to make things different for my son. He's growing up knowing all of his relations across the prairies.
Very good chocolate function.
The prairies have a complicated history, and Indigenous people are often at the receiving end of racism. My son and my nephew have been taught to not accept it, to not internalize it, even when we feel it every day. Our motto is "This is our territory. We belong here, even if people try to make us think we don't." The boys and I were traveling in the summer of 2016 when I found out a young Cree man named Colton Bushy was shot and killed by a farmer. The suddenness of his death stunned me. Our Cree beliefs tell us that our children don't belong to us. They belong to themselves, but we are responsible for keeping them safe. I always thought I could teach the boys how to protect themselves as they grow into men. Colton's death made me realize I was wrong. Colton's family tell me he was a kind young man who loved horses. He cut firewood for elders and helped out at ceremonies.
Could have shot the gun in the air. and told them, get out of the car. You guys are going to sit on the side of the road while the RCMP are on their way. But he took it upon himself to justice. He figured, oh, you know, they're on my land, without considering a life or anything, just go out there and just start shooting his gun at people, walk right up behind my son and shoot him in the back of the head. A mother does not deserve their children to go before them.
On that summer day, Colton's girlfriend, her cousin, and 2 other friends picked Colton up. They drank, swam, and then headed home. Colton was sleeping in the back of the SUV. The other 2 young men stopped at a farm and tried to break into a truck by hitting the door with a .22 rifle. The rifle breaks and they put it in the back seat of their vehicle. The SUV the young people were driving had 1 tire on the rim. Gerald Stanley was known for fixing cars, and his farm was close by. The young men drove into his yard. One got out and jumped on a parked quad. Gerald and his son Sheldon were in the yard and started yelling. The young man got back into the vehicle and they attempted to drive away. Sheldon smashed their windshield with a hammer and Gerald kicked their taillight, then ran to get a gun. Driving on the rim and unable to see, the driver ran into a parked SUV and came to a stop. The 2 young men exited the vehicle and ran. Stanley fired 2 shots. Colton woke up and jumped into the front seat. A few seconds later, Colton was dead from a close-range shot to the head. Colton's girlfriend and her friend would later testify that Gerald's wife Lisa said, "That's what you get for trespassing." The next day, the RCMP issue a press release, but Colton's death or Stanley's actions aren't the focus. Instead, the RCMP say that Colton's friends entered private property, are suspected of theft, and that someone died as a result. The response is swift. Numerous online comments are made about the shooting. Many are posted on a farmer's Facebook group that eventually closes. Comments are also posted on a different group called Farmers with Firearms. Some are from people living in towns and cities.
So as we're driving back to Red Pheasant from Saskatoon is when I went on my Facebook and my cousins let me know, he was shot. They had a flat tire and he was shot. And I was like, okay, like who shot him? Where did this happen? I had all these questions, but they didn't have the details. But when I went on Facebook and I seen all these comments by people about thieving Indians getting what they deserved, don't go on people's property if you don't want to get shot, we work hard for our stuff and you're going to come and steal it, I'd shoot you too. And reading all these comments, and I'm like messaging, like commenting back as fast as my fingers will type. And at one point I just grabbed my phone and I threw it at the windshield because we're driving, and my husband was like, don't go on there anymore. Don't read that stuff. I said, well, they're saying the most hateful stuff and they don't know what happened.
Gerald Stanley is charged with second-degree murder 2 days after Colton's death. Stanley's first court appearance is in North Battleford at the provincial courthouse, and he will be moved to Battleford for his bail hearing. There is a significant RCMP presence. Several reporters tell me this is not usual.
Not remorseful. No remorse in this man's eyes or his family's. For a lost baby. Although there is a lot of anger, a lot of grief, the legal system will do its part in terms of the RCMP investigation as well as the court process. We need to have confidence in that moving forward, and hopefully that justice will be served.
Stanley's family is escorted to the RCMP headquarters. None of the media get an image of Stanley himself.
Non-Aboriginal people, I want to thank you also for your support also. We must stop racism. Racism is hatred. Cannot continue this. You cannot hand this down generation to generation.
At the bail hearing, it comes out that Stanley used a restricted handgun to shoot Colton, and that there were 12 guns found on his property. Eventually, Stanley is released on $10,000 bail. Red pheasant, sweetgrass, little pine, and poundmaker are some of the surrounding First Nations in the Battlefords, named after the chiefs who negotiated Treaty 6 with the Crown. Stanley's farm is just a few miles away from Red Pheasant, where Colton was from. This is a conflicted territory, and Stanley's actions have exposed long-standing wounds. My first film job was doing background casting on a CBC miniseries about Cree Chief Big Bear. I cast my birth father as a chief at the time of treaty. My uncle played Chief Big Bear. That film changed things for me as a young woman. I started to learn about my history as a Cree person, especially what happened because of colonialism. It is a heartbreaking history. I want my son to know all that was done to ensure his generation's survival. The buffalo always sustained us. The newcomers saw this. When they started killing them off, we started to die from hunger. Our leaders realized we had to find a new way to live. They came together at Fort Carlton and Fort Pitt in 1876 to meet the Crown's representatives. They negotiated our future through Treaty 6, a nation-to-nation agreement. Our people were told that the newly arrived Northwest Mounted Police were there to protect us. Livelihood, education, healthcare, hunting rights, and more were all promised in exchange for sharing the land to the depth of a plow. We were told we kept our freedom, and because the treaties were done through our traditional ceremonies, most believed the promises made by the Crown. No one knew the government of Canada was preparing the Indian Act at the same time, which said Canada could dictate our lives. No one knew the Northwest Mounted Police was there to push us onto reserves. No one knew the written document said we surrendered the land. Big Bear and a few other leaders wanted to negotiate a better deal. Government representatives, like Indian Affairs Commissioner Edgar Dewdney and his assistant Hayter Reed, wanted them all to move away from the coming railway, so they used hunger as a weapon against anyone trying to resist. Big Bear tried to choose a reserve near Little Pine and Palmaker, but it was not approved. He and his people were sent to Frog Lake, Alberta. The government brought in an Indian agent named Thomas Quinn, who had a reputation for cruelty. He continually refused rations to the starving people. Another man, John Delaney, forced the women to trade their bodies for food for their hungry children. On April 2nd, 1885, the Cree warriors, led by Wandering Spirit, finally pushed back with force, killing 9 men they knew as their oppressors, including Thomas Quinn. The reserves in the Battleford area were also kept hungry. A group of leaders and warriors went to Fort Battleford to meet with their Indian agent to ask for food. The people of the town of Battleford got scared and barricaded themselves into the fort. When the Cree and Nakota arrived, the Indian agent refused to come out, and so some of the hungry people took what they needed in the deserted town. The government was already sending troops north from Swift Current to find and punish Big Bear and his warrior chief Wandering Spirit. One troop's leader, Colonel William Otter, decided on his own to attack Poundmaker's camp. Poundmaker went to Little Pine and Sweetgrass, requesting the warriors come to his camp. He felt that a large number of worthy men would convince Otter to turn back. Otter attacked before dawn. He fired into the Cree camp without negotiating, but the warriors protected the people and defeated Otter's troops. Eventually, Big Bear, Poundmaker, and Wandering Spirit turned themselves in to ensure safety for their people. Big Bear and Poundmaker were sent to Stony Mountain Prison. On November 2nd, 1885, 8 warriors, including Wandering Spirit, were tried without legal representation and sentenced to death. The government brought people in from nearby reserves to witness the hanging. Children from the residential school in Battleford were also forced to watch, to be taught what happens if they stood up for themselves.
I thought that was a real guy for a second. Handcuffs.
Handcuffs and leg irons. So that's kind of interesting when they talk about the government attracted settlers by offering free land, discounted sea passages, and reduced rail fares. And then look, the Northwest Mounted Police was transformed to meet the needs of the new communities. Okay, so this one, the first one we're going to look at is from North Battleford. It's this one here, Battleford 1887 to 1891. So 4 Cree squaws from the 5th to the 12th November.
What does it mean, squaws?
Well, that's what they used to call
1880.
the Square Rock, what they used to call women. But it's a derogatory term now, especially. This one's from Fort Walsh. Cold, very cold day. Windy day. Council held this afternoon with Indians. Big Bear signed treaty at 5 p.m.
That's really cool.
Yeah. He was pretty reluctant, actually, but his family were starving. His grandchild died.
Oh.
His granddaughter.
Hmm.
One of the things that Bishop always said is that we're here because the people who came before us loved us so much. Right? That's how come we're still here. Because those who came before did whatever they could so that you guys would be here and that your kids would be here. And it's been really hard. Right? It's been really hard
Yeah.
for people who've had a hard time. And those hard times aren't done yet. But we want things to be better for you guys. What do I be tears, brother? I know, right? It's okay. It's a thought that counts.
The night it happened, we had dinner. He didn't show up. I put his food in the microwave. When I looked out the window and I saw a big line of cars coming. And I looked out there and I told the boys, I said, look, there's something going on. Look at all these vehicles coming. Next thing you know, we were surrounded by cops. They drew their guns, surrounded the trailer. And I asked them what's going on. And they said, are you Debbie Baptiste? And I said, yes. And I said, what's Colton Bushy to you? And I said, my son. And they said, your son's deceased.
I woke up my brother Jace. When I did that, that's when all the cops, when I turned around and ran to the back room to tell my older brother that they're saying our little brother's dead, they all swarmed the house. They came inside, went room to room, closet to closet.
And I started screaming. I was holding my hands and he held me back, put my hands and he said, get yourself together. And then while he was shaking me and telling me that, he was smelling my breath. And I was like, what did I do? Why are you guys doing this to me? What did I do? But sitting home waiting for my son to come home and his dinner was in the microwave.
Wrong place, wrong time, sleeping in the backseat of a car. And he had to wake up to that, to his window getting smashed out, to the women freaking out and the boys running from gunshots. I would have did the same thing that he did. I would have jumped in the driver's seat and tried to get those women out of there.
Thousands of children in Treaty 6 were forced to attend residential schools. These are the bones of the residential school near Battleford. Many children from Red Pheasant and other reserves attended. Some never made it home. People are starting to learn about these schools and their terrible legacy, but they don't know about the other ways the Canadian government has oppressed us. The rights outlined in our treaties were ignored and overshadowed through the Canadian government's policies and laws. The Indian Act took away our traditional governance structure and imposed a chief and council system. The Indian Act criminalized our ceremonies, which is a way of criminalizing who we are. Because of what happened in 1885, the government introduced a policy called the pass system. This meant that our ancestors were confined to their reserves unless they had permission from the Indian agent. When our people began to pursue land claims and organize against our own oppression, the government added a section to the Indian Act that stopped us from hiring lawyers. Soon, we were outlawed from gathering in groups of any kind. The RCMP enforced it all, arresting anyone who resisted.
This house is where I grew up, and it's was built around 1920s when our land got sold in Delmas. We were moved here in Thunderchild.
My birth dad is married to Colton's aunt and lives on Red Pheasant. He's originally from Thunderchild First Nation and was one of the first Cree lawyers in Saskatchewan.
Mushroom,
Yeah.
is there a Cree word for justice?
Justice is an idea or concept where everybody needs to be fair with each other. And it's really strongly related to the word respect. So all the Cree words are intermingled into the idea of respecting each other and to be fair with each other. When a government is not fair with the subjects, or when two parties of an agreement like treaties are not living up to what they agreed to, that's not fair. So then you don't see justice, right? Miwichetuan, kasagita humaski, you're not really giving it up. And people need to understand that. Even the fact that people who don't want to understand that, that's an injustice for us. They have to understand it.
I want to certainly take time to thank the Creator for this beautiful evening, to have us come together here in memory of late Colton Bushi.
It's been a very challenging 3 weeks for my family and I, and we've been getting together quite a lot lately and supporting one another and staying strong the best we can. And we realized that what's happened to my brother Colton not only affects us, but it has affected many people across Turtle Island and around the globe. You there.
Gotta sew all your ribbons down. You don't want to be looking styling and one of your ribbons be falling off. There you go. When you start to feel more comfortable, you could push down a little bit more. It'll sew a little bit faster. I remember when the reporters came out to the wake in Red Pheasant, they wanted to know more about him. Who was he, as a brother? Who was he to you? What are good stories you could share about him? And I was sitting there with my kukum, Verna, and I usually don't talk in front of my kukum. I usually am either listening to her share stories or tell me things. So after that was done, and the camera went off and he thanked me and he walked out, my kukum turned to me and she's like, from now on, you're going to talk. Because she never heard me speak before. And so when kukum tells you to do something, you don't argue.
Yep, then that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what you do. And so I said, okay.
We got to get as many as possible, right? So hundreds of voices are louder than one voice. Yeah.
The family is losing trust in the process, so they hire their own lawyers. They're also worried that racism will affect the trial, so they launch a petition to ask for an out-of-province prosecutor.
I know this is a really difficult day for the family. It's really hard that he's not here with us in person, but to gather as a family and as a community that we still do something for the day, because if he was here with us, we would have did something today. So if someone would want to share the story of Coco being born today, if anybody would feel comfortable with sharing that.
And everyone was in their costumes and they were taking pictures, and my mom was a green witch and a pregnant green witch at it. I remember we were just laughing at her because she looked funny and her stomach was really big, and next day we all went trick-or-treating and everything, and we come home and came to good news that Colton was born. Ever since then, we've always had a big celebration like this. All us kids would get dressed up and go out trick-or-treating.
Yeah, and that's how Colton was born.
Yeah. Yeah, it came out on Halloween. I remember when she brought him home. He was just a tiny baby. I was so happy.
A brown baby.
Yeah, the darkest one out of all of us.
We were cruising down the road and he took a selfie of us. But I carry this with me everywhere. There's all these certificates from way back. He almost went to Washington, DC, and he's listed as one of the top contenders there. And he didn't make it. But then the year after that, he tried again. When he was a little boy, he was so smart. He had Harry Potter glasses. And he was really into science. And then if somebody was speaking about, something, and he would correct them, and he would say, he'd have these little Harry Potter glasses, and he'd push him up and he'd say, scientifically, I don't think that's right. And then he'd said, when he was a little guy like that too, he said, the world would get along if everybody just get a good book and go sit under a tree.
The family's petition is ignored, and the province stays with their own prosecutor. During the jury selection, both the prosecution and Stanley's defense team have 14 peremptory challenges. They can veto potential jurors without giving any reason why. Despite the racism displayed since Colton's death, no one is asked if they have bias against Indigenous people.
So they said they picked out 7 women and 5 men. Okay. Is there any Native people in that jury? No? Huh. Are you the, look, there's all your toys over there. Yeah, remember all your toys?
Yeah. Now I'm gonna just like quiet. The jury selection, it was like they just pull random numbers. They all the juries have different numbers, and they just randomly pulled like bingo balls. As people started coming in, it was mostly like non-Indigenous, like white people coming through the doors. And all of a sudden, this really tall Native dude, long hair,
glasses walked in and he looked around and I thought, cool, like maybe, you know, another Indigenous person. And he walked up to that jury table, like, because they have to check in. And he walked up to check in and I looked at Lyle, I was like, I'm going to start to cry. Because it, you know, like it gave me hope that Indigenous people were potential jury members. And immediately Spencer's like, challenge. So he sat down. There was literally a handful of them and none of them got through. We just got to pray that they go into it with an open mind and see the evidence and the truth for themselves.
Yeah. What I always kind of wonder is, you could have shot him in the arm, in the leg, right directly back of the head, execution style. So you can't say it was an accident.
Stanley made a choice. He decided to run after a gun instead of running after a phone. Yeah.
And that was my
Been waiting and waiting, so it's finally here. No more wondering. No more wondering, sitting up at night. Wondering why this guy gets to roam around free while the rest of us suffer and cry and miss him. It's always going to be like this. This is never going to go away.
The trial will last 2 weeks. The temperature has dropped to the -30s. Camera crews bundle up outside, while reporters crowd into the media room or the courtroom itself. Every day, the story will make headline news. Throughout the trial, the family will feel the pressure of the media spotlight.
Before you go inside, I was wondering if you have any sort of comments to make to the media or anything in regards to the trial as it gets underway today.
Just justice for my son, Colton Bushy. Excuse me.
The Battleford courtroom is small. Gerald Stanley's family sits on one side, and Colton's family sits on the other. There are 2 seats between them, reserved for media to split the 2 families up. The presiding judge is Saskatchewan's Court of Queen's Bench Chief Justice. It's important to remember that the trial is the Crown versus Stanley. Colton's family and their lawyers have no standing or say what happens inside. The Crown prosecutors barely communicate with them. Stanley's defense team includes Scott Spencer and several junior lawyers. A few days earlier, Spencer issued a statement saying the trial is not a referendum on race. The word racism will never be mentioned throughout the proceedings.
I know we are early, but what are your early thoughts, sir, if you feel comfortable?
Well, bottom line, there's no good date in something like this. It's it's a terrible situation to have to deal with, but it's good to get the evidence starting to flow here. So, to that extent, that's good. But otherwise, we're really early on.
Thank you for the time. That's it.
I say, Mr. Stanley?
Stanley, you have any remarks? What do you think about today?
I say, Mr. Stanley?
What do you think about today? 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 What do you
Bill Burge is the lead prosecutor. He begins by calling members of the RCMP. We learned that the search warrant was delayed and that the vehicle where Colton was killed was left uncovered for over 24 hours. During this time, rain fell on the scene, washing away much of the evidence. The blood spatter expert testifies that she wasn't actually at the scene. She based her conclusions on photos taken by investigators. Burge calls up the 3 Indigenous witnesses who were there that day. No one explains how the witnesses spent over 18 hours in police custody before giving their statements. No one mentions how the RCMP handcuffed and placed the young woman in the back of the car and took her along on a high-speed chase. Some of her testimony differs from the forensic evidence. Spencer accuses her of not telling the truth. No one accounts for how the trauma she experienced may be affecting her. Despite her being a central witness to Colton's death, the defense damages her credibility. Later, the prosecutor tells the jury he will not rely on her testimony. The 2 young men heard gunshots as they were running from the scene. They did not witness the shooting. Spencer cross-examines them at length on their activities prior to entering the Stanley farm. Some observers feel like the witnesses are the ones on trial. Spencer shows photos of Colton's body to 2 of the witnesses, which they find traumatizing. It also goes against Indigenous protocols.
We know that there's been many issues raised in terms of stealing, theft, racism, murder, all of these issues that are playing on a lot of emotions. But, I guess moving forward, we need to have that confidence that the Crown prosecutors are going to be asking the proper questions and doing their due diligence with all the witnesses that are taking the stand. I don't know if we've felt that today, but we're hoping that in the coming days that's what we're going to find that transpires.
But it seemed like it was deliberate that he showed him that photograph with Colton's body in it to get a reaction. Well, didn't help their case at all.
The defense strategy is that this was an accident. And so my question is, okay, well, if it accidentally went off, then it's going to have to be the defense's theory that it was purely a coincidence, that out of all the billions of places that bullet could have gone, it entered behind Colton's left ear. And that to me seems a lot harder to believe than a person acting in self-defense.
Stanley's lawyers are eager to build the argument that this was an accident. They say Stanley experienced a hang fire, a delay between pulling the trigger and the bullet firing. It's a rare malfunction, usually caused by defective ammunition. An RCMP gun expert testifies that hang fires can only last a maximum of half a second. For what the defense is arguing, it would have to be much longer between when Stanley pulled the trigger for the 3rd time to when he was next to Colton. Spencer attempts to bring in anonymous posts from online forums that claim longer hang fires exist, but he's turned down by the judge. Spencer then brings in non-expert witnesses who claim to have had longer hang fires. In one case, a man testifies to an experience 40 years ago while hunting gophers. In both cases, they were using different guns and ammunition than Stanley used. Their testimony seems to be given the same weight as the actual gun experts. Spencer builds a case that it's impossible to know why the gun went off. The media will call this a magic gun defense. Spencer also has to explain why the gun was pointed at Colton's head. He invites Stanley to take the stand. One of Colton's supporters is holding up an eagle feather, a symbol of truth. At the request of the jury, the judge tells them to stop. Stanley testifies that he removed the clip and that he walked up to the driver's side of the vehicle Colton was in, and that he tried to take the keys out with his left hand that was holding the clip, and while still holding the gun in his right, which was behind Colton's head. That's when it went off. Stanley is given the gun itself to demonstrate his actions. The family does not know this is going to happen.
See the man who held that gun and shot him in the back of the head reenact what he did. That was one of the hardest things that I've ever seen, and have to sit there and endure. All we want is justice for Colton.
For the grade 7-8, some of the grade 7-8 class of Nîpawistamâsowin. We're just here to show support.
Right now, it's pretty hard to predict where they're going to go with this. You know, it might turn to, they might decide second, manslaughter, acquittal, or a hung jury.
Alvin, would you be satisfied with a manslaughter result instead of second-degree murder?
I thought about that, and I'd really, you know, I just want to get this done and over with, and it's been hanging over my head, my family's head for quite a while, and you know, it's time that my family starts to heal and move on. And you know, as long as Gerald Stanley is charged and be accountable for his actions of taking a young Indigenous man's life.
By now, most observers feel that a murder conviction is unlikely. Manslaughter includes the careless use of a firearm, so this is the verdict people are now expecting. Throughout the trial, I've been thinking about the power of words and the effect they have. Spencer used words like terror, home invasion, and wreaking havoc. He emphasized several times to the jury that the young people were wearing hoodies. Under the law, Spencer couldn't claim Stanley acted in self-defense, but told the jury there's a self-defense factor. He also told the jury Stanley's hardworking, perhaps alluding to the stereotype of Indigenous people as lazy. He admitted he was creating a narrative for the jury. This is a narrative that resonates in this area of Saskatchewan. The judge tells the jury they have three choices: to find Stanley guilty of second-degree murder, manslaughter, or not guilty. The family and their supporters have nothing to do but wait.
How the angle of that bullet went through my nephew. It's almost upwards.
It had to be like this.
Yeah, like this. Then
Yeah. We did that this morning. We went outside with some reporters and there was a Ford Escape sitting out there. I think it was Globals. About the same kind that you got that was used in this situation. And yeah, they tried it. You have to reach in over the steering column and the key is in there. And then you have to turn it because you had to turn it off.
Yeah.
And if you're holding something,
yeah,
it's just about impossible to do that. Because you were trying it, couldn't do it. Plus, he had the gun in his other hand, which is an unnatural thing, you know.
They treated the witnesses like they were the criminals, that they were the one that shot Colton themselves when it was Gerald Stanley, and yet he was given all this privilege, freedom, walk away on bail. That's white privilege right there again.
Wait, the car.
What's that?
Hold on, hold on.
The words "not guilty" hang in the air. I see a jury member smile at Stanley. The sheriffs jump up and rush Stanley and his family out of the courtroom. Most of the jury jumps to their feet and runs after them. A couple of them stay seated, crying. It feels like everything has changed.
People in the courtroom were shocked. Family members were shouting, "You're a murderer, you're a murderer." People were crying. Even Gerald Stanley himself looked surprised. As he stood up, he turned around. His face looked quite startled by what had been announced.
And justice for Colton Bushy. I don't know what society is, but I guess you could shoot people in the back of the head and get away with it. And this ain't right. This ain't justice. And the law system failed my family in this murder trial. Thank you. That's all.
We will fight for an appeal and answers to all the racism that my family has experienced from the day that Colton was shot until the jury delivered the verdict of not guilty. We will not stop our pursuit for justice. We will stand here and honor my late brother, my family member, my friend, Colton Bushy.
Several trucks circle the courthouse, revving their engines. When I ask the crew to film them, one starts to record us as well.
They're raising tobacco and allowing the elder to say a few words, so please just give us a couple of moments. They will come and speak with you guys shortly. Thank you very much.
I don't want my grandkids to see this day that we have suffered, or any other families that suffered. My heart cries today.
All he ever focused was how much the kids drank. How far was the drive from Red Pheasant to Maymont? Who all took a swim? Who cares? A young boy got killed. A young boy got killed, point blank. And all we can say is, boom, the thing just went off. How stupid is that?
Justice crumbled today. And I feel so heartbroken to the family. I just can't believe it, what happened this evening. I can't say no more. I'm so lost with words.
This verdict, this acquittal, it sends the message that it's open season on Indigenous people. But it's not. It's not. The whole process has been stacked against this family from the beginning.
For the last year and a half, there was still a little bit of an inkling of faith in the legal system. I don't know if justice system is the proper term to be used. But when we can use excuses in today's society as an engine revving, a vehicle driving into my yard, someone hopping on my quad, to chasing them down and smashing their windows, kicking their taillights out, shooting them, and we're in a very troubled place. In this area, there's been a lot of animosity, a lot of racism for many, many years, many generations. That's not strange to us. We have 8 men that were hung here in the late 1800s. Why? Because they're trying to protect and feed their families. We have one of the chiefs, Poundmaker, that's being exonerated. Why? Because they understand now that they're trying to protect and feed their families, not criminals. But it's the non-First Nations narrative often that wins. And that's got to change.
And now's the day. Now's the time to flip the book to a new chapter and embrace the rage that is evident all across Canada today. To feel it fully. No time to avoid it and oppress it. Embrace it and welcome it and use it to fuel our decolonization. Use it to fuel the stories you're going to tell your children of the change that needs to happen.
Less than 24 hours after the verdict, a meeting is arranged between Saskatchewan's newly appointed premier and the family.
I would like to take the opportunity to have more of a conversation, if you will, with Colton's family on anything of your choice. Really, if that's sharing some stories or if that's your advice on some of the things that you could advise us on. I think all of us in the room, maybe some have heard it already, on where things need to change or improve.
We have, a 100-year-old judicial system. It's got some great things in it, but it's also got some huge shortcomings, especially when we deal with First Nations.
When my brother was shot on August 9th, I was dancing at a powwow at Dakota Dunes. And my cousin comes up to me before I danced with tears in her eyes, and she said that Coco had died and she didn't know how. She just got a call that we all have to go home. So on the drive home back to Red Pheasant, I go on Facebook to check in on my cousins because they're calling me and trying to message me and make sure that I knew and I was aware. And the first thing I saw was, natives were stealing and one had gotten shot and got what he deserved. He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have been stealing. Instantly, he was under attack. And not just him, but Indigenous people were under attack. I was under attack. All these leaders were under attack. Anyone with brown skin was under attack. And that was the day that my brother died. And as the investigation went on, to hear that at the preliminary, to hear that officers who've only been on the force for a couple of years are the ones who handled the evidence, that the lack of resources that were put towards this investigation, how it was treated so neglectfully, how Colton laid out in the rain, how he was not covered, that vehicle was not covered, evidence was washed away. My brother laid out in the rain while his blood was being washed away. And this is the evidence that's presented in court on his behalf. That's what the jury had to use to make a decision because it was shitty evidence to begin with. Say that. I couldn't say that to the public, that this is what my family is dealing with, because I wanted to give the system a chance. So hi, thank you again. And I love each and every one of you, and I just wish many blessings for your home and your families.
Two days after the verdict, the family gets on a plane to Ottawa. They want Colton's death to mean something and for the system to be held to account for how it failed them. Their first meetings are with Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, and Jane Philpott, Minister of Indigenous Services. Everyone, including the media, wants to hear what Colton's family has to say.
Haven't had time.
They would have been able to understand probably more upon the youth's experiences with RCMP, the trauma, treaty.
Hi, Terry. Good to see you over here. Thanks for coming in. So this is taking up a lot of our show today. We've got lawyers coming in and MPs coming in to discuss it. So this is where we do the headlines, and then we introduce you, and then we have 7 or 8 minutes, and it disappears just like that. Okay? So make your points.
All right, 10 seconds, stand by.
I'm Terry Malewski, and today on Power and Politics, seeking answers. Colton Bushy's family is in Ottawa to press politicians for change. They say the system failed him after a jury delivered a not guilty verdict in the young Indigenous man's death. What message are they bringing to Parliament Hill?
We're not here because only of the verdict. The injustices started at the beginning of this case and they culminated with the verdict. The verdict's only a small part of this.
Do you expect the system to change as a result of your meetings here? Are you optimistic about that?
Well, that's why we're here. My family and I were here to share the hardships, the racism, and the discrimination that we felt and experienced all throughout the process. And we're hoping that by vocalizing and sharing what we've been through, that it doesn't fall on deaf ears.
And I know this has been very short, but I'm grateful for you both coming in very much. Thanks to Chris Murphy and Jade Tutusis. Thank you both.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Good job, kid.
Me too. Am I done for today?
As Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale is ultimately responsible for the RCMP. Jody Wilson-Raybould is the first ever Indigenous Justice Minister. The family lays the truth of the RCMP's actions on Goodale's plate. They tell Wilson-Raybould about the range of racism they've experienced within the legal system.
Minister, are you pleased with today's meeting?
These are systemic issues that are going to take all of us to resolve. So we talked about that.
And is one of those
Thanks.
preemptory challenges? Are you looking at maybe?
We're looking at preemptive challenges. Thank you.
Dear Baby Baptiste Tansek, I am 13 years old and in grade 8. I go to Payasua School in Thunderchild. I am so sorry for your loss. I know how it feels to lose someone so close. What I did to heal, I smudged with sage and sweetgrass, and I went to a sweat. Just think about all the good memories of your son. He will always be in your mind and heart. Hi, hi, justice for Colton.
Fills my heart with hope, which I lost and gave up. But then every time I give up and I give up hope, and this happens.
I woke up in the middle of the night and I'm concluding my statement with, we Indigenous people of Canada deserve better. Yeah, it's kind of like the whole country's undergoing grief.
It's an honor to meet you.
Honored to meet you as well. You've done so well, my dear, standing up and so strong.
Our minister's announcement today is going to include a commitment to look at changing the criminal code to address the issue of jury selection, and that we'll get more details next week. So one way or the other, we're going to change the law.
This is one story that's now coming to light, but this has happened to so many people before and is maybe happening right now and we don't know about it. If we want to rely on, Georgina was saying, if we want to rely on the RCMP, but they're treating the family of someone that's been killed as if they're suspects somehow. Right, that perpetuates, that continues a story that there's something wrong with Indigenous people.
After all this is done, has been said and done, I thought we would move forward in our lives and start healing, but we haven't had that opportunity to heal at all. I come from grassroots level and, you know, I got, yeah.
Before we go in there, then exactly what are me and Jay doing wrong?
Yeah, nothing.
Well, I thought we were speaking
Yeah,
from the
well,
heart
that's
and we
one
were
thing.
all on the same page, Al.
Okay.
Okay, so don't stress us out.
We're all from home. We're all here for a reason. Keep that reason in front, put ourselves behind. Okay. Love you guys. Everyone be strong and be solid together here as we go in there. We're here to send a message for our people.
Yeah.
For Colton.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me that button.
This is here. Thank you so much for coming in. I know you've had some busy days of meetings. Let me just say off the top that, like I said on Friday and Saturday, our heart goes out to you, to your family, to the whole community. This is a time for reflection on how we keep coming to this point as a country and how we can make sure that no families ever suffer again the way you guys are having to suffer this week.
That's the message you want to get across. It's a constant nightmare. And I have to go through this life without my son.
Our cameras have to leave after a few minutes, but I'm allowed to stay. Trudeau seems willing to listen, but doesn't commit to doing anything concrete.
We don't just speak for my brother Colton. We represent all those who have also went through the process and received no justice and face all the systemic discrimination that we've endured. We stand here for them, and that's what Justice for Colton is about.
Can I ask, some people are interpreting the fact that you've met with the Prime Minister and several cabinet ministers as the government taking sides in this court case, and I wonder how you feel about that.
So it's a human issue. It's an issue of Canadian justice and about the inclusion of Indigenous people within the Canadian justice system. So it really is an issue for all of Canadians.
The family's last meeting is with representatives from the Conservative Party. Despite being from Saskatchewan, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer declines to attend the meeting.
It's come a long way. We got a lot more to come. We realize that our education rates are certainly not where we need them. But once we get there, the prosperity, we want to share the economic.
And it's not just Indigenous youth who need educating. It's your people who need educating about the true history of Saskatchewan. The world is watching your constituency to see what you're going to do and what the community leaders are going to, what the Saskatchewan leaders are going to do in response to this. People are talking about using vigilante justice to protect their property. And that all comes from the stereotypes that we see in this case. You know, this case was treated more like a theft than it was a murder. And there was stereotypes of the thieving Indian, the drunken Indian. We've seen that all throughout this trial. And that, you know, it all resulted in a not guilty verdict, right? And we're not here to talk about an appeal. You know, we'll let the province go through that process. But we'd like to hear from you about how you're going to deal with those stereotypes that this family has faced in our province.
The only way we can move forward from these types of situations or any type of situation is by having conversation, right? And really lending a hand out to one another. That's the only way that we're going to reach healing and reconciliation and relationship with people, right? Because I think that's ultimately the end goal. So we can live in unity and peace, right? So we can have relationship with everybody. To be frank and honest, I don't have an answer. I don't know what the answer is right now.
This racism needs to stop. And you could probably start with those farmers with firearms that say nothing but racial discrimination on that page. We don't have a page like that. We respect human life.
They've lost a loved one and they are getting hate mail. And that's, I mean, let's just say that's not right. I mean, that's a pretty easy thing to say. That's not right for these people to get hate mail.
We talk about unity, we talk about reconciliation. What are you going to do? As human beings, as people within your position, even, what is your answer to this going on in Saskatchewan?
The federal government introduces a bill that removes peremptory challenges from jury selection. Still, Colton's supporters across the country want more done to address the structural racism in the legal system. A month after the verdict, Saskatchewan's Justice Department declines to appeal Stanley's acquittal. Colton's family is devastated. The province will go on to strengthen trespass laws. The online comments continue to pour in, including one from a currently serving RCMP officer. The RCMP announces they will hold a series of town hall meetings to discuss rural crime. One will be held in the area Gerald Stanley is from. I decide to attend, along with local media.
Drunk to the point of mental incapacity, armed, meth heads. I may come into my yard or come walking out of the house whilst this is going on, and I'm being told just let it happen, but I don't know that they won't do something stupid first.
It doesn't matter if you're red, white, blue, green. Who cares what color you are? It's not a race issue. It's a criminal against a victim, and we're victims and we can't do anything about it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, and
I'll spell it out right now, right here and here. Probably 80% of us farmers here will do exactly what Gerald Stanley did.
okay, well,
You know,
and
that's how it's gotta be. I gotta protect my stuff no matter what.
okay, defensive property and defensive person are two different things entirely. We're never going to get rid of property crime. Never. There are things that drive property crime, okay? A large part of it is drugs, okay? It is part of it, okay? It's a reality. I'm speaking from experience.
I have a ranch and I gotta look after it. And then in my thinking, I'm not gonna shoot somebody for a quad or an expensive machine. If I do that, I gotta live with that. It's all about education. I know that if a guy is doing that, hey, I'm in a rough situation, but that's the way it is.
I wonder if there's an unspoken fear of Indigenous men that permeates these town halls. It makes me worry about how my son and nephew will be seen when they're older. I decide to find the young man who was the first Indigenous person to be dismissed from the jury pool.
As soon as I looked at the attorneys, I knew what I was to them. To the defendants, I was something that shouldn't be there. But as soon as I saw their eyes, they turned their heads, they looked at me, they immediately went back to their papers and wrote something down. And immediately I knew I wasn't going to make it. And a part of me was relieved and a part of me was a little mixed, because in all honesty, I would have given a fair verdict, to not be biased, because that's something I try to stand by, is to not be biased in certain areas, especially with law in general.
If you got called for another jury, would you serve?
Yeah, just my duty as a citizen. But once again, I might be, I wouldn't say objectified, but I just might be seen as another native.
The family is unhappy. They feel the provincial and federal governments aren't responding to their push for a structural overhaul of the legal system. Because treaties are international covenants, the family decides to advocate at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Jade is chosen as the spokesperson.
I've been wearing ribbon skirts to all the proceedings and that, and it's just something that's reemerged over the past few years within a lot of Indigenous nations, because I find that they're a strong representation of being a Nîpawistamâsowin, being a Cree woman. So when I wear them, they make me feel stronger, more confident, braver. They just make me proud, make me feel better. When I was reading it, I was like, am I saying it too fast? Am I saying it too slow? And then, yeah, we only timed it once. And they're like, it's perfect. It's right on time. We only went through it once. So.
The Federation of Saskatchewan Indigenous Nations has given the family their seat, but Jade still has to make it on the speakers list. The session has a strict closing time of 6 p.m.
Dispossessions and violence. J'invite la rapporteuse spéciale sur les droits des peuples autochtones, Madame Victoria Tauli Corpus, à prendre la parole. Madam Chairperson of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, distinguished members of the Permanent Forum.
Under Article 11 of UNDRIP, we have the right to maintain, protect, and develop past, present, and future manifestations of cultures such as archaeological and historical sites. This goal was in part realized by the Bears Ears National Monument.
It's now the afternoon, and Jade is still not on the list.
De leur présence cet après-midi.
I think if somebody's accused.
6 o'clock has arrived, and time has run out.
This demonstration of support inspires me to remain strong and to further pursue my commitment to the promotion and protection of Indigenous people's rights.
Je vous remercie. Donc, je fais une exception à la procédure. J'avais déjà annoncé la clôture, mais je me suis rendu compte que dans la salle, il y a une situation spéciale qui mérite notre attention. Donc, je vais passer la parole à la famille de Bouchy pour s'exprimer. Merci.
I am the sister of the late Colton Bushy, a 22-year-old Nehiyaw Napio from the Red Pheasant First Nation, a Cree community in the state of Canada. Colton and his Indigenous friends drove onto a settler farm one afternoon in August 2016, where he was shot in the back of the head by a non-Indigenous farmer named Gerald Stanley. An all-white jury acquitted Gerald Stanley of all charges. Colton was the baby boy of the family. Colton had a promising future with a strong work ethic. He had just received his forest fighter certificate. He was a traditional helper trained with ceremonial protocol and was always helping his people. Colton was not a thief. He was a kind and generous young man. I recommend that the Special Rapporteur and the expert mechanism undertake a study on the systemic racism and discrimination against Indigenous people within the judicial and legal systems in Canada. This study must produce recommendations to ensure the protection of Indigenous families who utilize the judicial and the legal systems. This will advance our calls on the Canadian government to establish a royal commission on the elimination of racism in the justice system. Only a royal commission has the authority to compel all involved in this miscarriage of justice. I felt heavy and I felt tired. And it crushed me that I didn't want to be at a powwow. And I didn't feel the urge to put on my moccasins. And I didn't have that passion in me to want to dance. And when I do dance, it'll be not because I feel like I have to, but it'll be because I want to. And it'll come from a good place. Because we're taught that we don't dance for ourselves, we dance for others. We dance for those who are unable to dance.
Follow up the speakers there. You know, Jade, you've done a very good job representing our people. Very proud of you. And oftentimes that's what happens is when something negative happens, that's when we pull together and we pick ourselves up as Indian people and try and move forward. And we'll continue to do that. And I want to acknowledge the family for doing that for all of us. They've taught us all a very valuable lesson. That yes, we make some steps forward, maybe 10 steps back, but we still got to walk together and take care of one another and love each other. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the time.
I grew up on a farm in southern Saskatchewan until I was 11. My adoptive parents now live on the family homestead that was settled by my great-grandparents.
Hey,
You made
you made it. Good, good, good. Yeah. Hey, Quanah.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good, you're getting taller.
Yeah.
You bad. Joe, that's Quanah. Hi, Mom. Hey, this is a big man.
I know. Quanah's jealous.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah. He thinks he's ready for the bigger bike, so we'll get him one.
My birth dad met my adoptive parents years ago, but it's his first time visiting the farm.
A lot of people hold rifles, too close like this.
Yeah.
And then you can't really balance, but you hold it further up, you have more steady control.
Okay, maybe we'll go through the rules of how to handle a rifle before we let you take some shots. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Rule number 1, always assume the rifle is loaded. Always.
Okay.
Always assume it's loaded. Number 2, always point this away from people or animals or buildings or anything you don't want to shoot. Now, this gun has got a safety on the trigger here. When you push this forward, the safety is off.
Oh, wow. That sounds pretty good.
That sounded good.
Yeah.
He's just about at the bullseye. He's got one here and one just below it.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, is that good shooting or what? That's 25 yards with a pellet gun in the wind.
Just waiting for the wind to go. I remember when I was about Quanah's age that you, in your bottom drawer of your desk, you had some stones. And I think you said you got some of them down south on that one quarter.
Yep,
Yeah.
I broke up some new prairie there. I picked all the stones by hand and I came across these, so I saved them. And now they go to you. Don't know. But hopefully you'll find out, Tasha.
Yeah.
This is just a piece of old tree or something, I
Oh,
think.
yeah.
That's cool.
What does it smell like?
How a rock would usually smell.
But I was thinking back when I broke that prairie down south. I could see where there was teepee rings, stones for teepee rings in 2 or 3 places down there. That's when I kind of thought, you know, maybe I shouldn't be breaking this up. But I went ahead and done it. Grew wheat.
It's a hard time right now, Grandpa. There's lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's a troubled world.
And that's why I decided to do the film, because I knew though the days following when Colton was shot that things were going to change. I don't want him to be looked at like he's not as important. And I'm scared because I know there's people out there that's how they feel.
I think you're always going to find that some people are going to be racist. Think they're better than the next guy. It's always been that way.
Well, and I think too, it's because a lot of it's over property, you know? So it's not like somebody's life was in danger, you know? It's over stuff.
Yeah, there's always 2 sides to that story, though, Tasha. What was the reason they were there?
Well,
and you have something of your own you worked hard to get. How do you protect it?
Not by shooting someone. Not by shooting someone.
No, I agree with you 100%, but what's the answer?
I just want people to understand each other better.
That's what needs to happen. It will happen, I think. It'll take a long time, though. I think it'll take a long time.
Juana wants to smudge. You want to smudge, Grandpa?
So what's this supposed to do?
This just helps clean and clear
Well, I say,
any negative things or
And just hold on to your balloon. Yeah. So if you want to walk up, you can come up and grab a balloon, just like Lex did. Yeah. Well,
I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. Colton would have been 25. This is his favorite holiday, so everybody make some wishes on your balloon when you send it up to your loved ones. Let Colton know that he isn't forgotten. And today was his day. So thank you for all coming. Hi, hi.
happy
birthday,
Happy
Coco.
birthday.
1, 2, 3. Woo!
That looks cool. Yeah.
I really wish you guys had met Colton. I wish you had met Coco. I wish you got to see his smile in person and feel his energy and hear his laugh and see his bashfulness. I wish you had all had the opportunity to meet him and know more than what happened to him and what happened to my family, and know more about just the memories we share, but to actually know him. I wish that for you, and I wish that for Kwana. You guys would have really liked him.
Oh, I pray for you at night as I sing and hold you tight. Pray that you will grow into a man to hold on to, and no matter paths unknown, you'll find shelter from the storm. I pray that you will always have a home. Oh, I pray for you at night as I sing and hold you tight. Pray that you will grow into a man to hold on to, and no matter paths unknown, you'll find shelter from the storm. I pray that you will always have a home. Hold on to your courage, hold on to your pride, hold on to the fire, shelter from the storm. I pray that you will always have a home. Oh, I pray that you will always have a home.
Joining us and watching, we stand up with my family. As requested by our family, we have drummers here, TJ Warren and Danton Morris, to join us. As requested, we would like the drummers to sing just like the drummers who sang outside the courthouse and could be heard inside during that time. These songs gave us strength during those hard times and will continue to do so. So please, we'd like to have TJ Warren and Danton Morris join us. Thank you.
Thank you to the organizers for having us part of today's event. And as we are here on the National Day of Action from 4 years of the acquittal of Gerald Stanley, we are here to acknowledge and continue the movement and supporting all of those. We send strength and love and light to everybody, and being able to continue the work as we continue to move towards a better day and a better life for our Indigenous people. No more should we have to exist in such an unjust and unfair society that continues to exist in the colonial systems, and our voice being minimized and our people being oppressed. My thoughts and prayers are with the family and with Jade and also Lyle, who I've taken also as an adopted brother of mine. And so again, as our people and our supporters to the movement that is the legacy of Colton Bushi and his family, we continue to uplift you in the best way that we can with songs, with prayer, with you in our thoughts and our mind. And with that, I have my little brother here with me who is young, 17 years old, a member of our communities. This could be anybody's child. This could be anybody's little brother. And so again, to remember that we are valuable, that we are, just, and that we are enough, that we should be honored and respected. That's why we are here. So with that,
Thank you, TJ and Danton-Moore. Right now, we'll be taking a short break. During this time, we will turn our cameras off and mute. You're welcome to stay on. We ask that during this time, you have time to reflect and take time to care for yourself. As we do know, this is a difficult time for everybody, not only my family, but all Indigenous people across Canada. So please take this time to care for yourself. And if you need help, there is the 1-855-242-3310, which is the 24/7 First Nation and Inuit Help and Wellness Hotline. If you have any questions during the break or any time, please leave them in the Zoom chat. And thank you so much. Take care. Hi, miigwech.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on February 9th, the 4th anniversary of the Gerald Stanley trial verdict. We're here with the family of Colton, his mother, his siblings, his uncle, his cook and Jenny, and many friends of the family and supporters. We have many people who have registered from across Canada to watch the film with the family online and to listen to the participants in this panel. We started with a prayer, and we will again ask Elder Jenny to start us off in a good way. Those who aren't able to be here with us tonight is Jade Tatusis, Chris Murphy, Sheldon Watney. Online joining us as part of the panel, they couldn't be here in person, is Tasha Hubbard and Chief Bobby Cameron of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. We'd like to thank them for taking time to and make it work to join us today. On the panel, I am moderating. My name is Mary Culbertson. I am the Treaty Commissioner of Saskatchewan. We have Eleanor Sunchild, Queen's Counsel, Debbie Baptiste, the mother of Colton Bushy. Jenny Spyglass, her aunt and our elder, is sitting with her. Mary Smiley, who's a farm owner and part of the Treaty Land Sharing Network, and Elvin Baptiste, brother to Debbie and uncle to Colton. In the room, we have several participants. We are taking all COVID protocols, and we have all rapid tested here in the room with the help of 2 volunteer paramedics. And we are all negative sitting at this table, so we could make sure that we could sit here together maskless and be safe while we are presenting on this panel. With that, I'm going to ask now that Elder Jenny start us with a prayer before we begin. Debbie, can you tell us how you're feeling on this day? Can you describe what kind of person that Colton was?
Heart is heavy. I have nothing but fear for the Indigenous youths
that what these RCMP can do to you, what they did to me. I am requesting for an apology from the RCMP and I haven't received one. If you Google racism, the definition is Canada. Google it. That's Canada for you. One-sided, no justice. Still demanding for justice. We haven't heard from Justin Trudeau. No follow-up. Still waiting. Tired of the broken promises, the lies. We want to change. We want to change in a justice system. And I refuse for the next generation to have to go through this trauma, to fight for your rights. Creator put us on this earth to enjoy it, love one another. But we don't get that because the Munya sucks. Refuse for change. So today, I feel really sad. The justice system in Canada sucks. We need change, and I'm still demanding for it. And that's how I feel. So I will pass this over now. Okay. My son, he was going to school. He wanted his education. He got his firefighting certificate. He was a Scorpios. He liked to cut wood and he sold wood. Took him out to whenever we had ceremonies, he was there with the wood. They were out there picking sweetgrass when it was grown, sage. Now we don't get that privilege because of the law they passed here. So you can't even go pick berries if you wanted to without getting shot. And that's what the fear that I fear for the Indigenous people. Justin Trudeau, he just keeps putting us on a shelf, hoping we go away, but we're not. My son deserves better than that. He wanted a life, his education. He wanted a family. Gerald Stanley took that away. Then he walks as a free man today. My son did not deserve what he got from that man. We request for justice, but will not go away. I'm going to keep coming back. I love my son and I miss him. And I never got an apology. I demand for an apology. Okay, I'm going to pass this mic over. Like I said, my heart's really heavy and I do not want to get emotional. And so with that, I'm pretty much done speaking. Thank you. Hi, hi.
Thank you, Debbie. Our next question will be for Tasha Hubbard. And Tasha joins us online from Edmonton today. Tasha, thank you for making this movie. Can you tell us why did you make this movie? And tell us a bit about the process and your reactions 4 years ago today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and hello, Debbie and Eleanor and family, Elder. So glad for your presence on this difficult day. So why did I make the movie? I think because I was so taken aback by what happened and how quickly the circumstances led to this senseless loss of life of this young man who was so loved. I felt, so much grief for the family, for Debbie, for Jade and others. And, I started to think a lot about how these kinds of acts are directly connected to, the colonial history that we're living in. And as someone who's also followed the way, police policy and the way the police deal with Indigenous people and the injustice inherent, I just felt really compelled to do something. And I remember talking to the family and saying, I'm not sure what, we'll be able to do. It can be hard to get the resources to make a major, a big film, but I would do my best. And, things just happened in such a way. We got the right support and help from a great team in order to bring this to the screen. I guess with process, it starts with relationships. I hadn't met Debbie prior to this, so it was going to visit. It was thinking a lot about how to tell that history, and just trying to be there as much as possible. There were times that I would come that I wasn't filming. I would just come to support, come to listen and observe, and then come back with our crew. I spent a lot of time with, preparing the crew, that I was really careful who I asked to work on the film, because I didn't want them to bring anything but good energy for the family and supportive energy for the family. So, that was whether it was our regular crew who was with us all the time, or when we're off to Ottawa and we were off to New York, sometimes we had to find local people, and we'd spend time asking them, what kind of people they were, before we gave them access. To be close to this family is a privilege, and that's how we proceeded. My reaction to that night, I was just thinking about that today, that, as someone who observes and watches and feels and tries to bring that to the screen, it had such an enormous impact on me. And, I know that doesn't even start to compare to what it was for the family in that time. And I think we all, after the shock and the hurt, we started to think about, well, I was, I'll just share a little story. I was, taking care of what we needed to do for the film, but also worried about the family. And a few hours after the verdict, I went to see Debbie, and just to see how she was doing. And, I don't know what I was expecting. I just was like, I just want to go and make sure, and that I give her my support. And already she was like, this isn't over. This is, there's more to do. And, I remember leaving that night and just thinking how much strength that takes to continue on. And that really was the family throughout. And that really became the inspiration and the core of the film. And we were really careful when we released the film to, the images that we put out into the world of this family were images of strength, that, that this was ultimately what it took. And it was their love, their love for their lost loved one, but also their love for our community, their love for our children. And, I felt that, my son and nephew felt that throughout. And, that's what gave me the, strength, I think, that was needed to finish the film.
Thank you, Tasha. You did an amazing job.
Thank you.
Our next question is going to be for Alvin. Alvin, can you tell us how the family has been doing since that day 4 years ago?
Well, watching this documentary, and it just brought back memories and the hurt coming back. It, you know, you can feel it still. That hurt's still there and has never gone away. And my family seeking justice for Colton, and also other Indigenous people out there that never received justice. And it really hurts to see a loved one like that to be killed that way. And it's a horrifying way to die. But, you know, we still love Colton. We still hadn't let him go. He may be gone, but he's not forgotten. He'll always be in our memories and in our heart. But my family still struggles through this. And once in a while, we remember Colton and we talk about him. And watching this documentary, it really brought back memories, and it felt like he was still with us, alive. Seeing his picture and stuff like that, it really, but it, you know, it really hurts though to see somebody like that gone. And my family is still struggling. Is still struggling. It's been 4 years, and we still seeking try to get justice though. But you know, to really look at how justice was, and it's still ongoing, and it's been happening since the arrival of the Europeans. And so colonialism, and how it still affects us today, and it's still ongoing colonialism, and it's injustice throughout those years in the past history. It shows itself, and signing with the treaties, breaking the treaties, the promises. And you can see it through residential schools. The residential schools there, you can see it, how many that were murdered or died in the residential schools. That is injustice right there. Taking and putting our people in the reserve system, the prison. That was a prison put there. That's injustice right there. You can see it. There's a history of that. And not just one nation can do it. It has to take the entire nation of Indigenous people to stand together as one. That's how we're going to take Canada. That's how we're going to beat Canada. When we signed the treaties, we dealt with the crown, the queen. Where is the queen now? The RCMP are there to protect us when we sign our treaties. We are the queen's subjects when you look at that. RCMP turned their backs on us, do not protect us. You can see white privilege happening in front of us every day. If our people go and protest, they're arrested. This is how we are treated as Indigenous people in Canada. We want to be equal as the European descendants that are here today. We cannot continuously living like this. Not generations and generations that have to endure this. This has to stop. We have to unite as a nation. Indigenous, our territories. Our territories are big. And then they put us into a little tiny reserve system. That's a bunch of baloney right there. You can see colonialism right there, injustice. Our lands will always be our lands, our home. Canada does not have title to Canada. This is where Canada is trying to break treaties. As long as we stand together, Indigenous people, our treaties will be strong. They are sacred. There's 3 people that were there, Indigenous people. the white people, and God, the creator. Let's enjoy life. That's what it's all about. To be happy. To be happy, to enjoy your loved ones. This is what life is all about, is to enjoy life, not to make people miserable, not to kill people like that. That is why the Creator put us here on this earth, each color, nationality, to enjoy life to its fullest. But Colton's life was cut short. He was shot in the back of the head. Systemic racism, you can see it today. Right from the Premier, Scott Moe, right from the Minister of Law, Don Morgan, they were also involved in this. The Crown Prosecutor did a shoddy job. The number one witness that never was allowed to take the stand was Lisa Stanley. She's seen everything unfold. But the Crown Prosecutor did not put her on a stand. The investigators did a shoddy job also. This is why my family that are fighting for justice, because we did not get justice in the court system at all. So my family still struggles, still seeks justice. Not just for ourselves, but for others too. Other people that never got justices. Look at the missing and murdered Indigenous women. They're being murdered out there. They're not doing a damn thing about it. They're not even doing an internal investigation at all. That has to stop. It's not cannot continue going on for the next generation. We want equal justice in Canada, and that's what we're going to be standing up for as one nation.
Thank you, Alvin. Our next question is for Eleanor. Eleanor, can you tell us what the ramifications of this not guilty verdict have been?
The ramifications are very large. For those who don't know who I am, I'm the lawyer for the Bushy family. I don't watch the movie. I didn't watch the movie today. It's really hard to watch. Usually Jade is here with us. She's doing her own activity today for the Day of Action. So we called today, February 9th, the day of the verdict, a day of action, because it's a day that should never be forgotten. It was the day that I saw the justice system crumble, the day that I saw the justice system that I was so proud to be part of in Saskatchewan fail. And the ramifications of this trial, they'll continue for years. I remember having a conversation with Jade after the verdict, after all of the advocacy we did, after all of the people we talked to at Parliament, at the UN, ministers, the Prime Minister, justice ministers, everybody we could talk to, we talked to. And it didn't seem like we were getting any justice for the family. And I told her, you know, it's gonna take time, it's gonna take years. But trust me, people are going to remember the name of Colton Bushy. They're gonna remember that name because he stands for all of the people, all of the Indigenous people in Canada who have been harmed by the justice system, who have been harmed by the police, who've been harmed by the court system, by systemic racism, the systemic racism that Alvin just talked about. That's who Colton is. And it's really hard that the Saskatchewan government didn't grant our request for a public inquiry. We asked for a royal commission from the federal government to the systemic racism that was apparent right from the moment Colton was shot. Right from the moment he was shot, it was all problematic. From that first press release, which said that somebody lost a life and there was a property crime. Well, it was more than that. It was a murder. Right to the moment he was found not guilty, right to the moment the province decided not to appeal, and instead of telling the family in person with the dignity that they deserved, they phoned and said, oh, we're having a press conference. It's in an hour and a half. And you know, basically they said, you have no time to get here. You have no time to get here. And it wasn't even personal. You know, that's how this family was treated. There was no compassion. There was no respect. They were treated like Colton was treated, like a thieving Indian. And that's the ramifications. And I'm really angry. Like, it's really hard to sit here on this day because all of those emotions come up. I remember being at the courthouse after the verdict with Tasha and watching those trucks drive around the courthouse in KKK fashion, like we're in Alabama. You know, they did that to intimidate. That's on film. And that's the province that we live in. That's the province that we have to raise our children in. And it's so disheartening. The way that I see the political atmosphere of this province going is even more troubling. You know, if those were Indigenous protesters in Ottawa, they would send in the army, they would tear gas them, they would put all sorts of heavy-handedness against them. But because they're non-Indigenous protesters there now, the army's not being called in, and you know, we can't really remove them. They can, but if it was Indigenous people, it would be totally different. And after the verdict, Indigenous people rose up across this land, across the world, and they were scared. And that's one of the ramifications of this not guilty verdict, is that it made Indigenous people angry. And we still should be angry. We still should be wary of the systems in place, because they're not made for us. They're not made for us. You know, Debbie talks a lot about love for people, and it's really hard sometimes to see that. But when you look at the love that she has for Colton, for her children, for her family, that's another ramification, that another outcome of this trial is that it made us as Indigenous people, even as with our allies too, you know, love each other more and cherish each other more, because you don't know how long we have. Like Colton was young. He wasn't, I always say this when I speak, he wasn't doing any crime. He was sleeping in the back of a vehicle. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Yeah, he was drinking, big deal. He wasn't stealing. He wasn't doing property crimes. He was in the back seat. You can read the transcript if you don't believe me, because that's what all the evidence said. He jumped in the front to drive away, and that's when he got shot. He didn't even know. And that just tells me that the level of white privilege, the level of racism that was apparent at the moment of the verdict and throughout the trial is even stronger now. And that troubles me greatly. On the positive side, though, you know, we've seen Indigenous people as a result rise up. We've seen Indigenous people have a stronger voice. This family has been a pillar for strength. They speak whenever they can. They do whatever the advocacy they can, even though it's really hard for them. And it's such an honor to sit here with them and speak about Colton. You know, we have to remember that this day was, yes, the day that someone got away with murder, but it's also a day that our people rose up and said no more. And a lot of allies at that point stood up with us too. A lot of people stood up with us in this province, in this country, around the world, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So that was a really positive result as well. And you know, I hope that we continue to speak out for justice and continue to seek justice. And like I told Jade in 2018, it's going to take some time. And it is going to take time because there's a lot of issues going on right now in this country. And so we just have to remember who Colton was, what he stood for, and use that to continue on in our fight for justice. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Eleanor. Our next question is for Chief Cameron, who's joining us online. He's outside of Treaty 6 territory tonight. So thank you for being able to join us online, Chief. Chief, you had really strong words of the night of the verdict. What do you have to say today, and has anything changed since this trial?
Nigan mantu naskumten miogi sagome guats. Ego no kum no naskumten igagi sumuan. Igagi smostamo. Kakio imamopi agi speak squag. Kanan to tateman no agumagantik. Upsis pogo skateman. First and foremost, we thank our God, our Creator, for a beautiful day today. To our Nokum, our Kokum, Jenny, for the prayer, and for all those that are here to listen, learn, heal, and continue that fight for justice for Colton. Debbie and the family, thank you, and we pray for you. For your family every single morning. We smudge and pray for you, that healing continues, but also one day that we see some positive progress for First Nation people across this country within this racial justice system we're living in. I want to start off by saying this to all the viewers and listeners. Very little has changed. Our First Nations are still getting abused and tormented and thrown in jail for petty crimes. One man reached out to me about 3 months ago. He got thrown in jail for 6 months for stealing a bag of chips. 6 months for a bag of chips. Gerald Stanley, if you're listening, and I hope you are, or someone gets this information to you, this video message, you may think you have gotten away with the justice system, but let me tell you this. You are going to be answering to God. You are going to answer to Creator. And it's not going to be a good decision for you. Don't ever forget that. You will pay that way. Nîpawistamâsowin. In the non-First Nation language, it's called karma. What goes around comes around. That is going to happen for sure, Gerald Stanley. you are going to answer to God. You killed a man. You killed a young boy. And all the weak excuses of hang fire. To all the viewers that weren't in the courtroom, what a despicable, disgusting court proceeding it was to sit in that courtroom when the Crown prosecutors and others, all they focused on was how much did the young people drink? How much money did they have? Who drank the most? Did you guys all share the same bottle? How long did you swim? How long was the drive from the bar to the river? The questions that had no relevance to the actual killing of our young First Nation boy, Colton. What a disgusting thing to be a part of and listen to. And my brother Alvin pointed out something really, really important. Gerald claims that his wife was going to be run over or she was going to be run over. I don't even know, but that was the gist of it. Her life was in danger. Well, for goodness sake, they didn't even put her on the stand to answer questions because her story wouldn't have coincided with Gerald's and they would have been caught lying. Here's the reality to everybody. As a First Nation man, if I killed a white boy in my driveway, even if I wounded him, never mind. Even if I wounded him with my rifle, there'd be no questions asked. They'd come arrest me, they'd break into my house, throw me in remand. I'd stay in there and I'd be doing 10 to 20 years, even just for shooting him in the leg. We've continued to lobby and push and advocate for changes in the justice system. But there's a lot of work to be done. We had one of our own First Nation lawyers who became a judge, and guess where they put her? They put her in Estevan, where there's no impact for her to make good decisions, positive decisions, rehabilitating decisions for First Nation people. They should have put her up in Prince Albert or North Battleford or Saskatoon or Regina, where we would have had a fighting chance at rehabilitating those First Nations. No, they stick her in Estevan and say, we did something good for you Indian people. We hired your own. Well, friends and relatives, nothing has changed. There is still a lot of work to be done, a lot of racism to address. And I want to acknowledge some of the RCMP members. There are some good ones. I want to acknowledge Chad McLeod for one, who's doing his best to combat and address the serious alcohol and drug problem within our First Nation communities. Chad, if you're listening, thank you. I know you and I had it out the one night, but you are doing a good job. Keep up the good work. That crystal meth and that fentanyl is killing our people. So keep up the good work, Chad. Mary, for putting this together, thank you. And to the family again. You know, this is our fight together. It's our job until the day we die. We are committed to seeing change in the justice system. Debbie is committed to doing this until the day she passes away. And we stand with her, we stand beside her, and we support her and her family in doing so. This whole justice system, for those that don't understand, when treaties were being signed, one of our chiefs in the 1800s stood up and said, what if your people hurt my people? And then what? But he spoke in his language. But that was pretty much the basic question. The Governor General and others and Alexander Morris stood up and called one of the redcoats over and said, I will assign one of these officers to protect your communities, to keep peace and safety in your communities, so no harm comes to your people. But since treaties were signed, they've been broken many times over. And this is the advocacy work that we do. We continue to be vocal, and we'll continue to be vocal. We're not going to go down without a fight. It is in our DNA that we continue to push for positive, serious change, not only in the justice system, the healthcare system, the education system, the whole economy. I thank you all for listening to me. There's a lot of work to get done. Very little has changed. There's much, much more work to get done. And we will continue. We will go the distance, because there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of First Nation people out there who are depending on positive change. The Gladue report, when it came out, very little change. We are pushing for our own on-reserve tribal police force. Our own on-reserve tribal police force. We are pushing for what we call the First Nation Frontline Officers Association. And when we get to that point, we'll have our own judges, our own lawyers, our own court systems. This is the way it was before treaty. We had our own laws and justice system. We had our own way of dealing with acts of violence or crime. One day we will get to that point, but it's going to take some time. On behalf of the Federation and our vice chiefs, our veterans, our elders council, our women's council, our youth council, please pray for the family, for Debbie and others, and for everybody, and for this whole overall overhaul of the justice system. We will make a difference together. It takes our minds and our hearts to come together and make these positive changes. Thanks for listening to me. Hi.
Thank you, Chief. Our next question is from Mary Smiley. Can you tell us about the Treaty Land Sharing Network and how it came to be?
Thanks, Mary. I just want to say that it's a tremendous honor for me to be here today, and for my husband, Ian McCreary, and I to be in this room, to be in this place. And what I'm going to talk about is just scratches the surface of what needs to be done. So the Treaty Land Sharing Network came to be as a counterpoint to the Gerald Stanley acquittal 4 years ago. And what it is a network of landholders, farmers and ranchers who have come together to begin the crucial work of honoring treaty. And that should be simple. It's an elegantly simple idea that treaties had in mind, that we would share the land for mutual benefit and for mutual sustainability of the land for all people, for all time. And how we got so lost so fast in doing that properly is a question for all the ages. Anyway, so the Treaty Land Sharing Network came together. It was originally the idea of Philip Brass, who some of you will know, and Valerie Zink, who sat down to have coffee one day after the acquittal was announced. And essentially, the idea is that farmers, ranchers, rural people who hold title to land can sign up their land to share as treaty intended. And they post signs and they sign on, the landholders sign on to a set of principles that, in addition to sharing your land as treaty intended, that you would also invest in and commit to learning the important work of decolonizing, of understanding the true history of Canada, and to work hard to decolonize the messes that we're in. So in 2019, there was a number of consultations with settlers as well as First Nations. And then in 2020, we had some of our first land sharing events. And I just want to say a little bit about that, if I could take the time. So it was in the beginning of COVID. It was at our farm at Bladworth, which is right on the border of Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 here in Saskatchewan. And so in addition to doing a pipe ceremony and a feast, then we also did a little bit of land sharing. And Ian and I picked a small pasture, just a 20-acre pasture that's not very far from our farm, because everybody had to get there sort of on their own hoofs. Elder Lewis and Dr. Kevin Lewis and his mother and his grandmother were our knowledge keepers, and they suggested to the people that they go walk around this piece of property. It was very, very windy, as we can only do wind on the prairies. And the Lewises stayed in this little copse of trees, or as farmers, we would call it a slough, and waited for us to come back. And in the meantime, when we all came back, they had identified between 30 and 40 different plants of medicinal or spiritual interest for First Nations people. And the reason I want to take the time to tell you that story is that I think our way forward in a good way, is through the land, with the land, and understanding the land in a brand new way. So the Treaty Land Sharing Network, in an effort to try and start what should never need to be started. We should not need signs. We should not need safety protocols. But unfortunately for right now, we do. And my hope is one day we never will. But the point being that Ian and I would never have known that land that way without the Lewises, without the opportunity to share land as treaty intended. And I think that's what the Creator had in mind for us, is that we could share. And so, yes, sharing is an elegantly simple idea, the idea that we had to figure out how to do when we were in kindergarten. But just like in kindergarten, it was hard, and you just scratch the surface a little bit, and it starts to show up how hard it is. So I think that's what all. So the other thing I'd like to say is that we did the official launch of the Treaty Land Sharing Network just last summer. We had a ton of media attention, both in Saskatchewan and across Canada. We had lots and lots of interest in what we were doing across Canada, and I'm happy to say that there is a group in Alberta that's looking to extend the Treaty Land Sharing Network throughout Treaty 6, as well as in Manitoba. There is talk of doing something very similar. So that's good news. Here in Saskatchewan, we've also had I think it's a huge uptake for a few months. We're now at about we're over 17,600 acres of land that signed on to the Treaty Land Sharing Network. What's not going so well so far is that we have very few Indigenous land users, and we are very committed that this not be a symbolic effort, that in fact, that we do figure out and work through together how to share land as treaty intended. So we need to keep up the hard work of reducing barriers for Indigenous land use, to increase the safety, to create opportunities for on the land programs, culture programs. We want to be there for the crucial work of reconciliation moving forward together. And we are very keen to do what we can without burdening the First Nations and Indigenous people and Métis people with more of the work to show us how to do that.
Thank you so much, Mary. Our next question will go back to Chief Cameron. Chief Cameron, Eleanor spoke about the trespass law, and Miley just finished talking about the Treaty Land Sharing Network. What is FSIN's position on this law, and how do you see this province listening and working with Indigenous populations, and what would you like to see?
Well, we've remained consistent on our position inherent and treaty-based. Long before this province was ever formed in 1905, that's when this province of Saskatchewan was created and formed, 1905. First Nations people thrived and lived and survived on all of these lands and waters right across this territory and right across this whole country, coast to coast to coast. Long before any settler arrived on these lands and waters, it was all our land. It's evident in the many places where there are artifacts found, where Sundance lodges and rocks and circles are found. It's clear. That has been our position. These are all of our lands, and they'll continue to be. When the trespassing law was being introduced, obviously we contested it, we opposed it, because it was a direct shot at First Nation people. You come on my land, then we'll kill you. Now, about a year or two ago, Ochapowace Cree Nation had an incident. Here it is for each and every one of you. They had an incident with a white farmer who leased land on their lands. However, Ochapowace didn't want to renew their lease with this farmer. So what does this farmer do? He comes onto the land anyway with a gun on Ochapowace land. Our CMP were called, Chief and Council were notified, and we did our pressure to get the RCMP to lay charges and whatnot. Nothing was done. The guy was able to drive away. In fact, he said, "I was shooting at squirrels and coyotes." Yeah, sure you were. Damn bullshitter is what he was. Sorry to say that, but that's what he was. Now, if that was me or Elvin on white man's so-called land, chances are we would have been shot, either by the farmer or the RCMP, and they would have walked away free men. So we've opposed it. And there are many good farmers. I know many too. Good, honest, humble, hardworking farmers who live by the rule of God too. Respect and kindness, honesty. Fellow respect for all of our people, no matter our skin color. So we have been consistently maintaining our position on that matter. Treaty trumps provincial law. That's our message. Treaty trumps provincial law. Treaties are of international law. When we go into court, when we go into battle, this will always be our position, because we are the original people of these lands and waters. We are the first people of these lands and waters. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Chief Cameron. Our next question is for Alvin. Alvin, what is your reaction learning about the treaty land sharing network? And what else would the family want accomplished?
What I would like to see it accomplish is that we should have the right to hunt, to fish, to pick our medicines, our seagrass, our sage. Have they forgotten how to share the European settler descendants? They do not share this land. They just keep taking and taking. Even what reserves lands we have, the federal government still wants that, our people. They're going into the Municipality Act, start taxing our people. That is not right. There was no such thing as tax. We enjoyed nature, what nature has to offer. Was anything like that, system like this. To enjoy life, you have to pay. That is totally bullshit. We were put on this earth to enjoy nature and also having a spiritual connection with nature. Everything that you see on this earth is alive. This is why the Creator has created this world, to enjoy life. Whatever you do on this life, the free will that God has given you, when you make your trip across to the other side, you carry that with you. Nobody else. That makes your trip harder to reach the spiritual world. The things you have done wrong in this physical world. This is how we've been taught, is to enjoy life, take care of one another, share. These are the teachings that have been passed on from generation to generation. When the Europeans came to this world, we were to share. We believe in that, sharing. That's how we were taught. But the Europeans did not want to share. They took and took. Treaty 6 territory will always be Cree territory. No matter, we know how far our land extends, our territory. Our treaties are sacred and should never be broken. If our treaties ever are broken, there's consequences that's going to be paid. This is what I have heard from our elders when I go to these treaty conferences. Once these treaties are broken, there's going to be turmoil. But we want our rights. We want to be free people. Free. Just like our ancestors were free. This is what we want. This is what we always wanted for our generations yet to come, is to be free, to enjoy the lands, enjoy the fruits of Mother Nature, to hunt, to eat the traditional foods that our ancestors have eaten, to look for medicines, look for our smudges, just like our ancestors. We want to pass this down to the next generation. Our ancestors have left our ceremonies for healing, and will continue to heal our nation, will continue to heal our people. Our ceremonies are strong. But yes, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. Our next question is going to be for Tasha Hubbard. Tasha, what is your message from the film in light of all that has happened in the last 4 years? I know the pandemic has slowed things down considerably over the last 2 years, but what are the future plans for the film? And what can people do who want to help remember Colton and promote real justice?
Thank you, Mary. I think for this, the film is, to keep the memory of Colton alive, to, center who he was as a person, and, to move beyond the, the ugliness that was put out there, that in so many ways is a precursor to what's happening right now across the country with, white supremacists and the hate that's out there. I mean, the family experienced all of that, and it alarmed some people, but I think a lot of people just put it aside, and now we're really seeing that grow. So I think remembering who he was as a person. I also think it is about knowing our history and knowing what's been shared today around treaty and our obligations to each other and to the land and to the beings we share this land with. And I guess in centering that our children, I had to make some decisions in terms of, how to tell this story. And one of the choices was, to put my son and my nephew in the film, who were 9, and they were with me when I heard the news that Colton had been murdered. And I've shared this before, and I shared it in the film, that I kept looking at them in the rearview mirror, and I was crying and just cycling through, what is this going to mean? And at the same time, trying to have a way to act, something to do, to not just let these things pass without contributing in some way. And so I hope the film inspires people to do that and to continue to center our future, center our children. And this is something Debbie shares very beautifully in the times we were able to tour with the film, was, love your children, and that the work that's being done here is for them. The other thing I hope people think about is, to really, and this is in our own Indigenous communities and also, within all the circles, political and education and all of that, is to really truly support and acknowledge our women and the strength of women like Debbie and Jade and Eleanor and what they put into this effort for justice for Colton. And it's efforts that our mothers and sisters and aunties and kokums and daughters do all the time. And I really believe that, the gifts they bring is what's going to really bring us forward. And I just wanted to acknowledge Autumn Baptiste and her courage in being interviewed for the story around the trespass law and the impact that it has. And that's, it is that courage that our women have. I just want to quickly acknowledge the treaty land sharing. I crossed paths with them. A lot of my work is actually around Buffalo. And the Buffalo are matriarchal. It's the women who lead, and I think the leadership that we show within our communities is really there. As far as the film, we're able to really take it all over the place until the pandemic, and just the day that everything shut down was the day that the group of us, we were to have gone to New Zealand. We'd been invited to screen the film in New Zealand's parliament, to show the film. The Maori invited us there, and we're going to host us. It's been tough. We've gone to online, and we've had a lot of online events and screenings, which is good. The life cycle of a film is usually about a year. And this film is really pushing back. It's still the top in the top films screened on the NFB website. It's taken up in classrooms in schools across the country, and will continue to do that for some time. And then we try to think of how we can use the film to sort of leverage other things. So one of the things I just wanted to share briefly is in conversations that I was having with Jade and Debbie, And what I was witnessing is that people and families who had also lost their loved ones to colonial violence were coming to them and wanting advice and wanting guidance. And they were doing what they could for these families. And so I said, you know, maybe we should come up with some sort of support resource guide. And that sort of snowballed into a partnership. So I'm at the University of Alberta, and we had a partnership with the University of Calgary, and I think there was 10 at the end of the day, 10 lawyers, academics, writers, advocates. You know, we managed to meet and gather at Banff with Debbie and Jade and Eleanor and have them share, you know, what are the things you wish you'd known when this started? I mean, no family should have to ever prepare for this. But the sad thing is these things are continuing to happen and the violence isn't stopping. So what are the supports that what's knowledge, what's, you know, how-to guides? And so I had lived in Winnipeg at one time, and there's an organization that had a booklet of sort of, you know, if your family or loved one goes missing, what are some of the things you need to know? And so that was our inspiration. So it's how to deal with police, how to, you know, how to manage media, you know, unpacking the legal system and sort of step by step how things work. Because I think the perception a lot of times that people have is that, you know, the prosecutor represents the family, but it doesn't. It represents the crown. And, you know, that's a flawed, you know, system. So, you know, having people understand that. So we've just released them today. You know, as like Jade's grieving a big loss, but has been doing some work behind the scenes to help get this out into the world, along with the team. The film team jumped in and did a lot of stuff as well. And so we launched that today on both the film website and also the National Association of Friendship Centers is our partner, and they have it on theirs, and we'll be working with them to distribute it into communities in print form. But in the meantime, I'm just going to put the link in it's the film website. We've got a specific resources tab. It's 8 booklets that can be downloaded. And it's just the sad, you know, fact that there's a gap in terms of supports for families. And we tried in some way to help meet that and support other families. And I'll just say, you know, the guides were given to the family of late Joyce Echaquan when that happened, to help her and support the family around her. And so, you know, it's one of those things. I was sad to have ever had to make this film. It's not, I would have rather met Colton. I would have rather, you know, we have other reasons to gather together today. I'm sad we had, you know, these guides are necessary. At the same time, you know, I think it's really about continuing to do and to take action. And that's really where, again, we're inspired so much by this family. Thanks.
Thank you, Tasha. Our next question is for Eleanor. What would the family like to do in terms of pursuing justice for Indigenous people?
Debbie continuing with her lawsuit against the RCMP, that's still active. We're still doing advocacy work in different areas. The family still calls for a public inquiry or a royal commission into the systemic racism that led to this travesty of justice, this injustice. We would ask that people continue to write the federal government for the Royal Commission and to the provincial government for a public inquiry. Again, we just need to keep, as Tasha said, this conversation going. Just want to keep it going. The family supports different initiatives, that booklet being one. Alvin also just mentioned that there is a lady who's walking from the West Coast to the East Coast named Krista Fox. She's from North Battleford, and she's walking for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and she represents the family of the late Ashley Morin, who is one of our missing and murdered Indigenous women. There's no shortage of injustices across this land, and we just need to keep fighting for justice. One issue that's coming up this year is the trial and the killing of the Métis hunters in Alberta, Jake and Morris Sanson. And that they were killed by non-native landowner in Alberta. And I think that is a case to watch, because it raises a lot of the same issues as were raised in Colton. And I'm really interested in how this case is handled. You know, it seems to be handled entirely differently from how the Colton's killing was. And I hope that I'm right, that this family will see justice in that case. You know, the Crown in Alberta sought a direct indictment in that killing. And there seems to be good people handling it. So, you know, hopefully that is a result of the family's advocacy work and all the talking they did about how the justice system failed them here in Saskatchewan. So keep calling out racism, keep calling out discrimination, keep calling out white supremacy. You know, it's on a rise, and that's very troubling. So we just have to keep pushing back and pushing forward and standing up, like the film. Stand up for ourselves, stand up for each other, and watch out for each other too, because there's a lot of hatred, a lot of discrimination towards Indigenous people, but there's also a lot of love, and that's what we have to push forward for. So with that, thank you. Remember the treaties, remember Indigenous people. We were here first, and I think people need to remember that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Eleanor. We have 2 questions left. The next question will be for Mary Smiley of the Treaty Land Sharing Network, and Debbie will have our very last question, and we'll have closing remarks and a closing prayer before any or after any questions from those watching. Mary, as a non-Indigenous Saskatchewan resident, what do you think this province and the people in this province need to do to assist Indigenous people achieve some sort of justice, or to even improve race relations in our province and throughout our treaty territories?
I think the key is to listen with a full heart and to recognize the unbelievable amount of privilege that those of us with whiter skin, I mean, it's all been designed for our benefit. And what I would like to bring forward is that there are a lot of people that hold land, that are rural farmers and ranchers, that want to do the right thing. And we want to make sure that we do the right thing based on what you are telling us is the right thing. So dismantle racism, improve the justice system beyond anything that it currently represents for Indigenous people. It's our life work too. Those of us that are part of the Treaty Land Sharing Network share your frustration, and it won't ever be enough to right the wrongs, but we really do want to move forward in a much better way. And it's going to be the lifelong work. We're all committed to it.
Thank you, Mary. Debbie, you will be given the final word on this panel. What would you like people to remember when they speak of your son, Colton Bushy?
That he was a kind, person. He had a huge heart. People could probably would have learned from him to love one another, respect one another, enjoy life. And that's what he did. He enjoyed his life. And then it was taken away. And then a man gets to walk away. And then we continue fighting because it's going to continue to the next generation. I want my son to be remembered that he was a kind man. He had a life. He was loved. He was not a thief. I want also people to remember what the RCMP did to me, how they came into my home, dragged me around on the floor, and told me my son was deceased. That I want an apology. If my son could hear me now, he would want that apology for me, apology for him, apology to my family, apology to the community, to the indigenous people, that this racism, it's real, needs to go away. We need to educate people, treat each other right, respect one another. But this justice system also needs to be recognized for their injustice for indigenous people. We want change. We want answers. And I want an apology. So that is what I want you guys to remember about my son, Colton Bushy. He stands for indigenous people. He shouldn't have died for the color of his skin. He was a human being with a kind heart. He dreamed of an education. He wanted to go to college. But why was that taken away? Gerald Stanley decided to take it away. Want people to remember Gerald Stanley walked away this day as a free man, a murderer, and Canada accepts it. They sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee while my son was laying out there. What kind of story is that? Canada accepts that? This is a scary place where we live. I fear for their generation. We demand for change, and we're going to keep going, and you're going to keep seeing me, and you're going to shut the hell up. So get used to it until do something. Justin Trudeau, we want to hear from you now. I'm still waiting. And that's all I have to say. Because right now, the anger just builds up in me with the injustice for our people that continue foster care, to throwing our youth in jail, putting our men in prison. We need to stand up for each other in these courtrooms. We need to show them that we're listening, we're watching, and we're not going away. And we want equal justice in the courtrooms. And that's it. Thank you, Mary. Hi, hi.
Thank you, Debbie. We have a question from the chat that Eleanor will answer. It goes perfectly in with what you've just said, Debbie. The question from the chat says, how do we protect ourselves as Indigenous people from Canada? So Eleanor will answer this.
Thank you to the person who asked that question. We have to protect each other. I don't rely on the systems in Canada to protect me, really. Like I have a voice, but how many times have I went even into a hospital and been questioned about the color of my skin? Luckily, I have a voice. I don't put up with racism at all, but I've seen it so many times. You know, I'm in a chat where we were talking just about that last night, about racism, for example, in the healthcare system. And I went there once with one of my relatives, and they were asking her, she's having stomach pains, and they're like, the doctors, well, how much have you had to drink? And do you do the weeds? And I was listening to this, and I said to him, why are you racially profiling her? Do you ask this to your white patients that come and sit here? Would you ask this to a white woman, you know, the same age as her? He goes, oh yes, I would. I said, no, you wouldn't. And then he apologized. But you know, we have to speak up. We have to document everything. You have a video on your phone. When you're dealing with the police, you can record that interaction. They're supposed to have a camera on their person, the RCMP. You can ask them to have their body cam on. There are ways that we can protect ourselves, but we have to, unfortunately, be vocal about it and push back and protect each other. We have to find real treaty partners like the Smileys, people who understand that this land is to share and that there was a treaty and agreement made between two nations where we could live in peace. That's all we want. We want to be unmolested. That's the term, treaty terms. We don't want to be fearful of where we walk in our treaty territory. I don't want to fear that my son or my child is going to get shot if he gets a flat tire in rural Saskatchewan. So yeah, we have to protect ourselves. We have to take every precaution, think ahead, and watch out for each other and watch out for ourselves and have a safety plan. And that's the reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And thank you to the person in the chat who asked that. I know the family is emotionally tired. I can just feel all the energy off Debbie and her family there. This is a horrible day 4 years ago. And I remember where we were. And I'm sure many of you all remember where you were that night. And it has changed a little bit where we're talking about these things. The Treaty Land Sharing Network was born, where people are talking about being treaty partners, where people's true colors have been brought out, right? Where you see people who were once your friends, their supremacy comes out and thinking that their white privileges means more than us as Indigenous people. My dad was a white man, and he was Irish and Scottish, and he thought he was First Nations, but he taught me about white privilege. And he'd always remind me about how things were so different on the reserve than from the farm down the road where we lived as kids. I'm always cognizant of my light skin and that I have privilege. I have more privilege than my kids. I have more privilege than my spouse. I'm very cognizant of that I'm still look Native enough to be discriminated against, to have an argument with the police, to have someone follow me. I'm still cognizant of those things, walking in between kind of two worlds. To this day, from the day Colton was killed to this verdict, we can't drive down a road and feel safe. We can't drive down a rural road to use the bathroom when you're on a long road trip. And this is the prairies. Sometimes you have to go down a road so you can go to the bathroom. And we can't do that. We are very aware that we cannot do that. If you pull into a road and it's a farmyard, you immediately have this choking feeling inside. What am I doing? Because you know you're not safe. And that person who asked that question, what can we do to protect ourselves? It's exactly like Eleanor said, we have each other. We went to law school, Eleanor and I, so we could navigate our people through justice systems we knew weren't made for them. These systems that are all here in place are not made for Indigenous people. They're not made for Brown people. And like Tasha said, the prosecution represents the Crown. We think that it's supposed to represent us as people, as citizens, but it represents the Crown, and the Crown chose to fail this family. They chose to fail Colton. And all of these systemic issues come from land grabs, from failed treaties that were bargains and negotiations just so they could get access to the land and to the resources. I know the commissioners before me thought the promises they were making would be upheld, and they haven't been. And here we come to our generation who have to fight for every single inch. In this generation, we have our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Every day, there are still women going missing and still investigations not being done. Every day, people are scared to walk on their own land, their own territories their ancestors were born on. Every day, they're still finding graves that were beside schools in this country. All of these systemic things were born from broken treaties, from residential schools to missing and murdered Indigenous women, abuse of the land, trespass to land, murders. These are all from systems that were not meant for Indigenous people. It's going to take a lot of fixing, but we can do it together with each other. That's why we need our treaty partners who are our good allies, who are our neighbors. And as a modern day type commissioner, I can't say that enough. We need to heal from these generations and generations of abuse. If we do not heal our nations and heal our people, heal our communities, then treaties mean nothing. That's the work that each and every single one of us have to do. And we have to do it together. To make this day possible, we had our colleagues at SICC, Scott, Ernest, Ricky from FSIN, and Tony here to help us. We wouldn't be able to do that. Our friends with the Treaty Land Sharing Network, our staff, Autumn, Sage, Angie, all our staff at OTC, we all did this. The staff at the Dakota Dunes who came in this room and smudged with us to make sure things were done right. Everybody was doing this together. The two young paramedics at the back of the room who came to do rapid testing so we could have this panel. That's being treaty partners working together. So with that, I'm going to ask our elder, Senator Jenny Spyglass, to give us a closing prayer. Everyone, please take care of yourselves. Self-care is really important. It's for our mental health. And this is an emotional day, remembering 4 years ago what happened. When Indigenous people show up to protest, RCMP are on high alert. When white people show up to protest, they get tickets and fines while they block an international border. That's white privilege.
Help me say a prayer for my relatives. Today, it really touched my heart. It's very hard. As an elder, I had a tear in my eye because of my relatives, what they have to go through, what us Native people have to go through. When I was taken away from my family, they put me behind a farm truck. They trespassed our land to come and pick us up. They stole our kids and shipped us out. Still today, they're doing the same thing to us. Indian Affairs thinks they own us. They trespass our land to come and pick up the babies. That really hurts my heart. With that, I'm going to ask you to help me pray. We'll have a good night's sleep. That everything's going to fall back to pieces. Everything will be set right in her heart. Her heart will get healed. The good Creator will take away the pain, the loneliness, the heartache. I